Zen Master Baoche of Mount Magu was waving a fan. A monk approached him and asked, "The nature of wind is ever present and permeates everywhere. Why are you waving a fan?" The master said, "You know only that the wind's nature is ever present. You don't know that it permeates everywhere." The monk said, "How does wind permeate everywhere?" The master just continued waving the fan. The monk bowed deeply. The genuine experience of Buddha Dharma and the vital path that has been correctly transmitted are like this. To say we should not wave a fan because the nature of wind is ever present, and that we should feel the wind even when we don't wave a fan, is to know neither ever presence nor the wind's nature. Since the wind's nature is ever present, the wind of the Buddha's family enables us to realize the gold of the great earth and to transform the water of the long river into cream. So this is the koan with which Dogen ends Genjokoan, this manifesto of his, what practice is, what practice-realisation is. And I think it's a wonderful example of a koan as proper teisho, as demonstration, as actualization. And unlike some koans, which you feel that the baffling part is, in a sense, what they're for, this koan actually makes a very solid kind of sense, if we allow it. So, I'll read through the koan again, talk us through it a little, and then we'll go back into Genjokoan, and then we may well go completely sideways. Zen Master Baoche of Mount Magu was waving a fan. A monk approached him and asked, "The nature of wind is ever present and permeates everywhere. Why are you waving a fan?" This is, in typical Zen terms, a test, a challenge. If the wind permeates everywhere, what need is there to wave a fan? Isn't that beside the point? And it's a bit cheeky, a bit challenging. Hey teacher, I know the Buddha Dharma, I've read the sutras, I understand that the nature of all things is that the wind permeates everywhere. So why do you feel the need to wave a fan? Lots of Zen images of how ridiculous something like that would be. But in our terms, in terms of separate and not separate, of course the monk's just diving down a hole and carrying on digging. Because, well, he's separate all over the place. Firstly, he thinks he knows something. The wind permeates everywhere. He knows this as a fact. He knows that. And this is an object, this is a thing which is separate from him, the knower. We have subject and we have object. And then we have him, and then we have the wind blowing in the world. He can know that the wind is there, ever present. He can observe the wind being ever present. Or can he? But he's fundamentally separate from it. But then what does he think the wind is anyway, if it permeates everywhere? Sometimes I feel the breeze, sometimes I don't feel the breeze. Is this some kind of mystical windness that's always and everywhere, lurking in the background, an essence behind everything? This is what my teacher Barry Magid would call woo-woo. It's come on. What is this? Do you mean that? So the teacher comes back. Why are you waving a fan? The master said, you know only that the wind's nature is ever present. You don't know how that it permeates everywhere. So, okay, you've been told, you've worked it out that it's logically consistent in terms of the Dharma, that the wind's nature is ever present. But come on, how does it actually permeate everywhere? The monk said, okay, tell me, how does wind permeate everywhere? Oh, what's the next piece of knowledge? What's the next mystical insight that I can gain? And of course, the master is showing him, he's exactly showing him how the wind permeates everywhere in this case. Can you feel the wind now? Of course you can, because I'm fanning. We can put this several ways. I'm actualizing the wind. I'm embodying through my body the wind. I'm expressing the nature of wind through my action. The wind needs realization. The wind needs to be practiced. The wind needs to be manifested. And of course, if the monk sees but he doesn't see, he sees the teacher fanning. He doesn't see that that is the manifestation. He doesn't see that that is the wind permeating everywhere. But then the teacher reminds him, still waving the fan. The monk bowed deeply. So does the monk get it? Does the monk suddenly see the wind? Don't know. Dogen doesn't tell us. But in a sense, whether the monk does or doesn't get the wind is irrelevant. Do we get the wind? How can we say this? Well, the first important point is that the monk's kind of imagining the wind as a thing. The wind's there and I'm here. And whether I see it as some kind of mystical substance or the result of a set of physical forces, it's still a thing out there. But if the wind permeates everywhere, then obviously it permeates me. But it permeates me through my action. Now that's interesting, because if I'm seeing myself as separate from the world, then the world is separate from my action. That's how the wind is manifesting. It's manifesting through my action. Why is the master fanning? Why is he being the wind? Why is he making the wind? Well, we can answer this in a lot of ways, can't we? We can say, well, he obviously has the intention to fan. Now again, if we're saying the wind's nature, normally when we're talking about my intention or my understanding or my thought, we're going, oh no, that's not it at all. It's something far more natural and subtle and spontaneous. Well, no. the Master's intending to fan, or maybe he just fans from habit. Maybe he fans, well, maybe it's just something he does. Maybe it's part of being him. So we get this kind of, it could be this, it could be that. What's the significance of this? Well, we're undermining this separation between, on the one hand, the subject who knows and the thing that's known. On the one hand, me, sitting here looking out at a world which is separate. And there again, from intention through to pure spontaneity, we're undermining all these very traditional distinctions we make in how we see the world. And maybe if I say, oh, we're all not separate, then we think about one thing and another thing and try and imagine how they might in some way be not separate. Here we're talking about the direct manifestation of that in all these different ways. This body is not separate. Yeah, but this thinking isn't separate either. And this action isn't separate from the world. It's part of the world. It's part of the world worlding. And this is the lesson that Dogen keeps coming back to in Genjokoan. The wind, the world, not separate. Now this ought to be enough of a lesson. But of course, in one sense, the monk isn't really talking about the wind at all. I mean, he is talking about the wind, and it's important not to forget, because this is embodiment, this is actuality, this is the real world as we really directly experience it, the wind. But at another level, he's talking about the Dharma, obviously. The Dharma permeates everywhere. The Dharma's nature is ever present. So we're using the wind as an example, an image of the Dharma, and the way that the Dharma, well, the Dharma's nature is ever present within us. Yes, but what does that mean? Is it a little seed we need to come along with a watering can? Is it some kind of mystic substance? What on earth do we actually mean by that? And it's a perfectly fair question. If the Dharma is ever present, then job done. Why do we need to practice? Why do we need to sit on our cushions? And this, of course, is the great question that Dogen went to China with to try and get answered. This was his great issue with practice. Why? If I am, in one sense, already a Buddha, already enlightened, if all things possess Buddha nature, then why on earth would we have to practice? Huh? The wind's nature is ever present. It permeates everywhere. And so in a deeper sense, the monk is asking the master exactly this question. If the nature of the Buddha Dharma is ever present, if it permeates everywhere, why do I need to practice? Why are you waving this fan? Same question. And it's the same answer. Let's try and think about that in a moment, for a moment. Dogen's answer basically is that the Buddha Dharma needs actualizing. It's not separate, it's ever present, but it only comes to be as practice. That's a very good fundamental point. What is the nature of being a practitioner? To practice. What is the nature of being a Buddha? To practice. Is this something we can have? Is this something we can possess? Is this something we can even be? Well, no. It's something we do. Practice realization. Realization as practice. Practice as realization. The Dharma in that sense isn't a thing either. It's an activity. It's a process. It's endless investigation. So we can go back into Genjokoan. Actually have a look at this for a second. This is section 10. When the Dharma has not yet fully penetrated body and mind, one thinks one is already filled with it. When the Dharma fills body and mind, one thinks something is still lacking. For example, that sounds just paradoxical, but okay, Dogen's got his example. For example, when we sail a boat into the ocean beyond sight of land, and our eyes scan the horizon in the four directions, the ocean simply looks like a circle. No other shape appears. This great ocean, however, is neither round nor square. It has inexhaustible characteristics. To a fish, it looks like a palace. To a heavenly being, it looks like a jewelled necklace. To us, as far as our eyes can see, it looks like a circle. All the myriad things are like this. Within the dusty world and beyond, there are innumerable aspects and characteristics. We only see or grasp as far as the power of our eye of study and practice can see. When we listen to the reality of myriad things, we must know that there are inexhaustible characteristics in both ocean and mountains, and there are many other worlds in the four directions. This is true not only in the external world, but also right under our feet, or within a single drop of water. And this is the basic point. Practice-realisation is endless. It's not something we achieve, not something we accomplish in that sense. It's endless investigation. There's section 12, beginning of that. Therefore, if there are fish that would swim or birds that would fly only after investigating the entire ocean or sky, they would find neither path nor place. The life of a fish, the life of a bird, is exactly this investigation. Investigating the sky, investigating the ocean, just through the activity of living. As Dogen says in the end of the previous section, we should know that for a fish, water is life. For a bird, sky is life. A bird is life. A fish is life. Life is a bird. Life is a fish. And we should go beyond this. There is practice enlightenment. This is the way of living beings. So for Dogen, this is what it is to be human. What it is to be a creature of the Dharma. We practice realisation, not as towards a goal, towards an end. We've been reading the Heart Sutra, listening to the Heart Sutra. No path, no final goal. Simply practice. And this is how we realise non-separation, the non-separation of the bird in the sky, the non-separation of the fish in the ocean, the non-separation in our life of practice. This is how we activate, embody, express the Dharma as practice, as waving a fan. This is how, to come back to the four great vows, the Bodhisattva vows, this is how we go about saving all beings. Lovely. How lovely. Practice realisation. Waving a fan. Yes, but what happens when, in the English phrase, we say, the shit hits the fan and goes everywhere, and it's chaos, and disorder and stench and the reality of the other side of our life? What is it when not separate isn't just waving a fan? Yesterday was Martin Luther King Day in the United States. And I suppose there are two images of Martin Luther King, one of whom is this kind of black Santa who says it would be really nice if everybody was really nice to everybody. And the other is of this radical, deeply political, deeply spiritual preacher, opponent of the Vietnam War, proponent of redistribution of wealth, a real radical. And of course the reality of King's life was very much that. It was no picnic. He and the other members of the civil rights movement did not politely go to Washington and say, "Excuse me, could we get some of these things sorted out?" It was a long and bitter and violent struggle. And reading, listening to some of the original members of that movement, talking about their training and talking about, in a way, the hardest part of all. When you were trained not to resist, not to fight back when you were dragged off a bus for sitting in the wrong seat, not to resist, not to fight back when you were beaten up for trying to order a hamburger at the wrong counter. And they were saying the hardest thing is to remember that these are the same people as us, that we are not separate from these people, that it is not about them and about us. In our terms, we are not separate. How do we hold that when the shit hits the fan? So sometimes not separate is simply sitting on a cushion or simply waving a fan. On another occasion, it might be being beaten up by the police. It might be taking part in a massive demonstration. It might be a myriad things, 10,000, 10 million things. How do we manifest not separate? Here, now, but in each moment. The easy ones, the difficult ones. Not as a state of mind necessarily, not as a set of ideas at all, but as whatever is required of us. Waving a fan, facing the situation that life presents us with in each moment.